Lee Muns is challenging Georgia Public Service Commission incumbent Tim Echols in the Republican primary. Early voting has already begun, and Election Day is June 17th. Muns is running on a promise to protect ratepayers and push for smart, sustainable energy solutions. A lifelong Augusta-area resident, he brings over 35 years of hands-on expertise in power generation and infrastructure. Muns will explain how he intends to prioritize consumers, economic growth, and job creation. Taking a slight jab at his opponent, Lee Muns' campaign slogan is, "Ready to be a watchdog, not a rubber stamp." Join us for a conversation with Lee Muns. All right, we're fortunate to have Lee Muns coming in before the election. The runoff has already started as of the taping of this interview. We're already in the early voting segment, but the election itself is June the 17th. And Lee, thanks for joining us.
Steve, it's a pleasure to be with you today.
And one of the things we love to do at Editorial Interchange is we love to sponsor local businesses, give shout outs. We don't do paid promotions. We just have people cite a local owned business in their area that they really enjoy dealing with. Can you give us one?
I absolutely can, Steve. And it's Main Street Treats. It's our local ice cream shop, which those are things that are kind of going away. But in our little town, the people that have it have opened it up in an old building there in town. And it's right next to a little city park there. So you can come get your ice cream, go outside, sit at the tables, and it's about 50 yards away from the train track. So you may have a train come through while you're sitting out there having your ice cream. So it's a nice addition to our town.
And what town is this, Lee?
Harlem, Georgia.
Harlem, Georgia. All right. So if you're in Harlem and you got to have an ice cream, you know where to go. Thanks for doing the shout out. Public Service Commission. You're running against the incumbent in the primary, Tim Echols. What made you want to run for the Public Service Commission?
Steve, I have worked in the construction industry all of my life, and I've been in business for myself for right at 35 years now. And in the work that I do, I very intimately follow the power industry, generation, distribution, all of those type things. I've been involved in some power plant projects, some repowering projects, some combined cycle projects. And so I've watched it for a long time, but I live in the area close to where Plant Vogel was built. And actually in my earlier years before I went in business, I worked at Plant Vogel. But during this last go round with Unit 3 and 4 and the cost overruns and the lack of management and oversight by the PSC really, really concerned me. And because I'm a Georgia Power customer and getting hit with the rate increases that other customers are getting hit with, I just started watching things. And then when the announcement came out in January that the election for the District 2 seat was going to be this year, I said, okay, I'm in a good place in business and everything else, and I'm going to give it a run.
What would be your general philosophy on having a utility that, especially like in the electrical side of it, because we've all seen the Vogel episode, that's functional and cost effective? What would you do? What would be your philosophy on how you would approach things?
Well, the first thing is, with the Georgia Power being a regulated monopoly, as the regulators, you've got to look deeper into the numbers and look at the operating cost. You can't just be presented a spreadsheet, look at the bottom numbers and think that they're okay. You got to do some deep diving in there. And the first thing to do that is the entity that's providing that information needs to know that you are going to deep dive into that information. Just as I was reading some stuff from the hearings that are going on right now today, the PSC staff has come to the commission and said, it looks like Georgia Power may be more aggressive about new generation capacity than is needed. And listening to some of the comments from the commissioners, it's like, okay, I heard what you said, but I don't believe it and I'm not going to follow it. And that's the wrong place to go.
How would you evaluate the performance of the current commission as it stands?
Lackluster.
You want to give any emphasis on what in particular you're
Well, I have watched some of the hearings, and especially the Mr. Echols, who I'm running against. I watched one particular hearing where a woman was sharing about a biomass plant, and he got down and was sitting at the table and very much was just, kind of in her face. And at the end of the day, yeah, you have a position and you have a responsibility, and that responsibility first and foremost is to the ratepayers, and to start treating them with a little bit more respect. And when people come in there to bring issues to the table, act as this it is important, because it is. It affects them. It affects their lives.
It's one of the few industries where the government tells you what your profit margin is going to be, as in the case of Georgia Power.
Absolutely.
How would you proceed with making that determination?
Well, first of all, I mean, I understand, as a regulated company, you have to watch it, but yet they are, they have shareholders. I mean, so they have an obligation to their shareholders as well. But I have one lady who was a CPA, and she came to me and she said, Lee, I own Southern Company stock, and I appreciate, the dividends that comes with it. But there comes a point in time when you realize it's a little too much, because you realize the impact that it's having on people out there in society with their power bills and everything else. So you have to look at that. And the first thing that's most important is looking at what is the cost. What is the cost of delivery? What is the cost of generation? What is the cost of operations? As a business owner, every year I have to look at, you're going to have your overhead costs regardless, whatever you do. But you have to look and make sure that they are respectable, they're responsible, that you're not gluttonous in your operations.
And we all lived through the painful, expensive, long expansion of the plant Vogel.
Yes.
Uh, Nuclear power, everyone says we really need to stay in it. It's going to be the future of power generation from now on.
Yes.
Has regulation, government regulation, federal regulation, state regulation, maybe even something that the PSC is putting on the power companies, has all of those regulations made it too expensive to do a nuclear facility anymore?
Yes, Steve. One of the things I want to be able to do when I get this position is to start collaborating more with all of the entities that come into play. I'm a firm believer nuclear power is the most responsible, clean generation capability that we have going into the future. You know, 50 years ago, the first nuclear power plants came on board. But one of the things we did as a nation where we missed it is every one of those 70 something nuclear power plants that are out there, they all are different and unique. And so therefore they cannot share maintenance parts. They can't, call Joe and say, hey, I need to borrow a belt. You can't go to O'Reilly's or AutoZone to pick up stuff. So what we've got to do going forward is we've got to figure out how to make the industry more uniform in what we're going to build, make sure that the players can come together, because if a company's going to build one reactor and that's all, that's not cost effective. So how can we make it where these companies can be making multiple parts, and therefore you can drive the cost down? The other thing is federal regulation. We've got to work with them intimately to say, if we can come out with a design format of a plant, go out here and build one. And that's what I had hoped was going to happen with Plant Vogel and with the 2 units over in Jenkinsville. The crazy thing is the Chinese built 4 of those units, just like Plant Vogel 3 and 4, in less time than we built them here in the United States. The South Koreans went over to Saudi Arabia and built 4 nuclear power plants over there during that same time frame. So what we've got to do is get all the players to come on board, have a collective conversation, and say, hey, we can have good competition, but we've got to realize the overall impact and the outcome that this can be for our nation. Because at the end of the day, Steve, we all rely on electricity, period.
Yeah.
Nothing can live without it.
And I think we bankrupt a total of 3 companies trying to do the Vogel expansion. So we definitely need to try to figure out a way to make it more functional and more efficient. And I agree with your better design thing. We're going to have to do something if we're going to get back into that, because another Vogel experience would probably tank us, don't you think?
Yes, yes. I mean, and that, it's going to be hard for people to want to bite that bullet again because, you know, it's one thing to just let the cost overrun happen and not do anything about it. You lose the people's respect. If you have a cost overrun and people understand that you did what you could and it was a daunting task and you did everything that you could to minimize the cost, because one thing they could have said is, hey, Georgia Power, we're going to cover the actual cost, but you're not going to make a profit on this cost overrun. That's just not going to happen. But we are going to protect you and we're going to cover the cost. But then I mean, I'm in this geographic area, and when you find out people were renting equipment and they went to the company and said, hey, why don't you buy this piece of equipment? You've already paid for it twice while you're renting it. And they go, oh, no, we don't want to buy it. We want to keep renting it because we're on a cost plus contract. Somebody allowed that mentality to exist.
All right. Hey, your incumbent is big on solar. What is your view on solar? Do you think that solar power has lived up to the promises that were made in the past?
There's a lot to go on there. I mean, it was a learning curve coming on. I think one of the things that hurt it initially was there was so much federal money put into the process. There were panel makers that spent a lot of money, went out of business. Again, puts a bad taste in everybody's mouth. But I think as we let the dust settle, it's a compliment to power production. Will it ever be the base load? It will never be the base load. Never going to take that. As I told somebody the other day, solar power is like your sprinkles on your cake. You can have them or not have them, but you still want the cake. We still have to have the base load of power production that's out there, and the key place to find that is through nuclear. However, can we make it a complement? Absolutely. Here in our local area, they're talking now about data centers going to be 8,000 square feet. So we need to go to these people that are building these facilities and saying, look, you're going to need to beef up the steel in the building so it can handle the weight load of rooftop solar. You're going to need that as a complement. You're going to need that as a battery backup. And the other thing with the data centers, I feel like when they come in there to put these data farms in there, they need to put their own peaking units in. So when you're hitting the 100 days of summer and you've got peak heat loads and everything else, they can come online, produce their own power.
Do you think Georgia Power's policies are working with solar? I know they have some sort of buyback where if you're generating more, producing more on your own personal property, that they can pay you to put that power on the grid. Do you know if that system's working, or would you change anything?
Well, Steve, they have a limit to it. And the other day I had a conversation with a design engineer, and it's a double-edged sword. Certainly you would want it to be where somebody, if they wanted to go and it was economically advantageous and they wanted to go out there and put solar on their roof and maybe overbuild and be able to sell it back. The problem is your distribution cannot always handle it. If you were to put that energy back to the system, we're going to have to look at in the future, how are we going to upgrade the cabling system to be able to handle the increased load? Because if you have somebody who is an independent solar provider, they have to limit what they can feed to the system at certain times. A lot of people don't understand when you get into the heat of summer, your cables, they're metal, they heat up. And sometimes they cannot carry the same capacity that they may carry in the wintertime just because of the design and the metrics of it.
Where do you stand on fossil fuels for power generation? Coal, natural gas?
I am not a coal person. Coal had its day. It was part of the boom of our country and the growth of our country, and it served its time. But now it's time to move it on. I know that Southern Company tried to build a plant down in Mississippi that was going to be a clean coal plant, and it just didn't work. And the other thing is you have a lot of waste streams that come from the coal plant that have to be dealt with, and it's just not viable going forward. Now, does that mean that we all of a sudden we need to go out there and shut down the existing coal plants that are there? No, you can't. You cannot bring new generation on in 6 months. You can't go build out a plant. These things are years in the works. But I think in the IRP, there needs to be a plan that how you're going to replace that generation and eventually move the coal fired and stuff like that offline, terminate those facilities, and move on to cleaner fossil. I don't think that we'll ever do away with fossil completely. But I would like to see us again get more towards nuclear. But we have to realize it's going to be 10, 15, 20 years down the road before we can ultimately make this transition. And the bad problem we have right now is because Vogel went so sour and the Jenkinsville plants went so sour, we lost time on staying ahead of the curve because they were so entrenched in getting Vogel done and trying to figure out how they were going to recoup the costs and everything else, that they lost their eye for the future.
Well, I know that they're going heavy with natural gas in terms of building capacity as well. Do you have any problems with natural gas facilities?
No, I mean, the new combined cycle units that you're bringing on, I mean, they have emission reductions on them, and those are a help. And the people have to understand that that is the near term, not the long term. But we have to realize that demand is going to increase in the near term, and you can go and you can build a combined cycle facility and basically have it online in about 30 months, generating the same capacity that the 2 units at Plant Vogel took us 14 years to build. So you have to look at that in part of the near term envelope. But in the long term, again, we need to be moving towards the nuclear, because for me, that's the way to go. But we've got to get all those players to come together and start saying, how can we streamline the process? As I tell my employees, Henry Ford did not get it wrong. He made sure that he put cars out that were good and people could afford them and people could drive them. And he was consistent with the parts and the process and everything else. And that's what we've got to do looking at our power generation moving forward. However, right now, if you want to go buy a generator for a combined cycle gas unit, you're 5 years out getting delivery, because everybody else, we spent time 7 extra years trying to finish a nuclear plant. Everybody else was out there moving on ahead. So, and you've only got so many people that produce this equipment. So as a nation as a whole, not just Georgia Power, but as a nation as a whole, robust conversations need to be had of how we are truly going to make our country power independent, but yet cost effective at the same time.
Right. Well, the biggest topic now in electrical generation are these data centers.
Yes,
and
sir.
they devour electricity like a monster.
Yes,
so
sir, they do.
what are we going to do about electrical consumption? Because I've had some PSC members, I've had some articles that I've read related to data centers saying that Georgia doesn't have enough capacity if we keep adding these things on like we're adding. What's your answer?
Well, it's like this. A farmer can only put so many cows in a field. And if he doesn't regulate what he has out there, they're going to eat it up overnight, and then he's not going to have anything to eat. Same thing with these data centers. I wish the governor would not have paused, would not have vetoed the bill last year that was going to put the pause on the data centers, because I believe the legislators realized what was taking place, what was happening, what was coming. They wanted to put the commission together to clearly evaluate these things. Again, this is an item that is driven by money, but you have to stop. Money cannot drive every decision. You have to look at your resources. Can you have the power production? And then the other big thing is the water consumption that comes along with the data centers as well. So sometimes you got to step back and take a little bit of time and evaluate exactly where we're at and just put the money factor to the side for a little bit. It'll come back. It'll come back. But these things are too big, too much, and we can't afford to screw up.
No, no doubt, no doubt. It's been theorized out there, and I don't know if anybody's actually implemented a plan yet, but some of the data centers, because you've got these very large companies like Apple and Facebook, Meta, and all these other companies that have trillions of dollars at stake here, they have said that they might be willing to put these small modular nuclear facilities in next to their plants that just funnel the energy only into their plant. Now, is that something you would be in favor of? And is that something, since it's privately owned and operated, is that something you think the PSC should regulate? Should they do it?
You know, Steve, when they do something like that, I mean, you're going to have the federal regulators, because it's nuclear, are going to be regulating that, and that is a robust conversation that needs to take place. I do not think the PSC is going to have the staff or the expertise to go in and manage or oversee an SMR. I have followed the SMRs greatly. There are a lot of different companies out there that are designing these. TVA just committed to a 4-unit SMR in Tennessee. There's another group that has committed to these in Texas. And again, Vogel put us behind the curve. We couldn't have any other conversation but plant Vogel. And now all of a sudden we've got other people around us throughout the states that are ahead of us. And now we're trying to play catch up. But you don't play catch up by making hasty decisions. But the SMRs are a great way to look at it. The other thing is the cost is totally bore by the people that want to come in and build the facility.
What do you think about the PSC getting involved, or maybe another agency of the state, maybe Department of Natural Resources? I don't know which agency it would be or which commission it would be, but the placement of these small modular units, because it's a private entity, should we have regulations in place regarding safety and geographical location and, maybe not proximity to highways or heavily populated areas or things of that nature? Should we have state regulations in place related to those facilities?
Yes, Steve, we should, and again, that is going to be a collaborative effort. In order to make it cost effective, the states and the federal regulators are going to have to come together, because the other thing you're going to have is security concerns, of folks being able to access the facility and everything else. So it's going to have to be a collaborative effort. Do I want to see the state just build a whole nother department to do this? I really think it can come under the PSC because it's under power development and power generation, but there's going to be a cost associated with it. But again, a robust conversation that says, let's really sit down and round table this thing. We want the security, we want the safety, we want the cost not to be borne by the ratepayers, and we want it to be successful for all entities involved.
Let me change subject a little bit. Do you see any way that utility costs can actually be lowered, or are we at the floor now and we're just trying to hold the price down?
I think it can be lowered. I think operational expenses within Georgia Power are high, and I believe we can look within their structure and see how we can streamline. I know from talking to people, more and more of the Georgia Power operations as relations to switching centers, even power poles, laying new lines, all that kind of stuff. A lot of that is being, subcontracted out. Is that making it more cost effective? Is it making it more expensive? I just think we need to sit down and have those conversations.
Let me ask you about a problem that we're seeing in other states. A lot of times they're taking these alternative energy units, windmills, solar farms, and things like that, and they're placing them on agricultural land. Farmers nowadays, the average age of the average farmer is getting up there, and the children are inheriting the property, and they're taking the easy money putting a solar farm out there instead of farming. Do you see that as a potential problem for the agriculture in Georgia?
Yes, I do, Steve. I mean, again, we have to look at a balance. I mean, as our population continues to grow, our food requirements are going to grow, and the quality of our food. And again, this goes back to, if you look at what you can do with nuclear and the acreage footprint that is required for those to exist, that ultimately is the best direction to go in. You know, we're at the stage right now that, yes, some solar has been out there for a while, but we don't know, you know, what's the long term, how long are they going to last, and then what's going to be the waste stream that comes about, you know, once they've met their life cycle. What are we going to have to deal with?
And I know the wind energy generation seems to be waning. There's so many things that go on with the wind, the destruction of the avian population, birds getting swatted by these things, the noise they make, the
Yes.
fact that you can't recycle the components. I mean, there just seems to be so much going on with wind energy. Do you see wind energy as a potential energy source in Georgia, or should we forego that?
The only place that you could potentially set up wind energy is off the coast of Georgia. And as far as I'm concerned, that's off limits. Because if you've ever looked at the footprint of what has to be built in order to stand a wind turbine up, I do not want to mess up our coastal ecological system by going out there and doing construction work off the coast. I like my Georgia shrimp.
Absolutely. And it may interfere with the port as well. You know, you want to keep that traffic going in and out to that port because it's a multi-billion-dollar facility.
That's right.
Um,
It's just it's not a cost effective endeavor. Um, what does it make people feel good? You know, they say we're doing this, yeah, but going out there messing in the ecosystem in the ocean, the topography in Georgia does not lend itself like the state of Texas to have big wind turbines.
let's talk about Europe for a while. We watched Germany's economy just go down in the toilet. Most of that was energy related. They closed their nuclear facilities. We recently saw Spain and Portugal go into a total blackout. Um, have we learned any lessons from the Europeans?
I hope we're learning. I read a whole recap of what happened in Spain and Portugal, and it was a 90-second domino effect, and it happened quick, and it took a long time to recover. And so not only do we have to look at power generation, but we have to look carefully at distribution. I know there are some upgrades that are going on right now in the different yards and stuff like that, and new technologies. And those are things that need to be done in order to bring the reliability back online as well. I know there's new cabling that's going up in many areas to be able to carry greater load demands. And people have to understand, when you go with larger cables, sometimes you have to put in new tower systems and everything else. So it's not something that just happens overnight.
Right. Is there a way to achieve a more reliable and more protected power grid? I know we talk about terrorism events. We talk about hacking into plants, you know, foreign entities getting into our power plant computing systems and causing damage. How do we create a more reliable, protected grid?
Steve, you're asking me a question, and I'm not trying to evade the question, but that's where somebody who is sitting on the commission has the ability to access all of that information and evaluate it in a prudent way. In other words, I call it getting into the weeds. And sometimes, for somebody sitting from my perspective, I cannot tell you the safety procedures, the safety precautions that are currently in place. I hope they are robust. But that's one of the reasons why I want to serve on the commission, is so I can be somebody there for the ratepayers that's not just going to glance over it, but I'm going to deep dive into stuff, because the question you just asked me is a very important question.
A personal question. Are you willing to take campaign contributions from employees of the utilities that you regulate or lobbying firms that work with those utilities?
No, sir, absolutely not.
And then tell us how you differentiate from the incumbent, Mr. Echols.
Oh, greatly. Number one, I'm a business owner. I know what it's like to work people from different socioeconomic backgrounds. I understand the things that affect them. I understand as a business owner what I have to do to be able to sign those paychecks every week. I also understand, because I work in the industry, the dynamics and the issues that people that are building power plants, that are people that are putting in new distribution systems, the issues that they face with employment, with getting people, capable, qualified people to go in and do the job. So I think I bring a wide range of knowledge in a lot of different areas where I do not think my opponent possesses.
And we've talked about a wide array of things. Is there anything in this interview that we probably should have discussed that you want to bring up to the viewers that we didn't hit?
Well, I know we did not talk about the potential rate freezes that were put out there. I don't think that was very prudent by anybody. I think it was totally for the election that's going on. They did not expect another Republican to qualify to run against an existing commissioner. I was very strategic in what I did. I knew that the election was announced in January, but I didn't say anything to anybody that I was taking it into consideration. And I didn't let nobody knew that I was going to qualify until the day I showed up at the Capitol and I qualified. And that was purely because I did not want a third person candidate put into the race. I wanted to make sure when people were looking and getting ready to vote, they saw a distinct difference between Mr. Echols and myself and the thought processes and what I was going to bring to the table as opposed to what he has done while he has been at the table.
And can you elaborate on any philosophical differences you think you may have or the approach that you may take as a commissioner as opposed to the incumbent?
I think one of my physiological things is I understand the importance of being a regulator. It means that you have to hold an entity accountable, that you have to look out for the ratepayers that are out there. And at the end of the day, you are part of the vision setting process. You don't just show up, listen to people talk, vote, make decisions, and move on. You must be much more engaged in what the future is going to look like.
If anybody wants to follow your campaign, what are the links and how can they find it?
They can go to Lee Muns for Public Service, Georgia Public Service Commission is my Facebook page, or they can go to www.leemunsgapsc.com.
Awesome. Well, Lee, thanks for carving out some time for us. We appreciate you doing this interview.
Oh, Steve, I thank you for your time very much. It was a very good, great questions, and it was a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. Hi, I hope you enjoyed the interview with Lee Muns. We would love that if you could share this. The early election has already started. So early voting is already in progress. The election is June 17. Tell your friends this Public Service Commission race is very, very important. If you use electricity, if you use broadband, this race is for you. So get out there and cast your vote in the primary June 17 or any of your early voting locations prior to that. Please like, please subscribe, and please share, and we'll see you next time on editorialinterchange.net.